Dream. Today I thought it would be really fun to talk about covering deep ideas, deep concepts, sort of more meaningful topics in movies, and how it does not take a lot of time to do that. And to set this whole video up, I thought I would do a recap on a video that I reviewed. I gave my 2 cents on a couple of months ago, and that was the movie Heretic with Hugh Grant. And when I don't know about you, but when I first saw this trailer, I was really excited because the way the trailer went, it really made it feel like they were going to cover some heavy, hard hitting topics in this movie, and it looked like it was going to be a really great psychological thriller. And what it actually was it started very strong, and I think everybody in the theater who saw it, the first 30 minutes, it was absolutely heading in the direction they thought it was going. And if you can't remember which movie I'm talking about, or maybe you just didn't see it, it's about what is supposed to be the equivalent of Jehovah's Witnesses going door to door knocking on people's doors, asking to talk about their faith. And so it becomes very clear in the trailer that they're going to knock on Hugh Grant's door, and it's going to become a real tete-a-tete, real sort of test of their faith. So the first 30 minutes of the movie, that's exactly what happens. And this is all stuff that can be gleaned from the trailer, but they get to the basement scene, and you think, okay, this is where they're going to be put down in some basement, and it's going to be a huge maze, and they're going to have to answer some real soul-searching kind of questions to get themselves out of this predicament. What actually happened is it got to that point, and right when the story would have to take a turn and start asking those deep questions, well, that's the point the movie just turned into crazy guy locks girls in his basement and they have to get away. And it was very disappointing because the potential that movie had was really high. So that was the stuff that I covered in a video once upon a time. And there was one comment that is a really well thought out comment, and I thought they did a good job, even though they were essentially disagreeing with my take on it. And they said, essentially, maybe you were expecting too much out of a 90-minute movie. Maybe there is only so much that you can cover in 90 minutes, and you sort of should essentially lower the bar for something that short. And I'm sure that is an opinion that a lot of people share, probably even the writers. But I still respectfully, fully disagree. I think in the right hands, you can cover any number of incredibly deep topics. So what is the misconception? The misconception is you need time to cover something deep. And I would say, no, you need time to cover multiple points or subjects. But to cover one thing very well, time is not what you need. Great writing is what you need. And to have great writing, you need smart writers. Because a story is only as strong as its writer. So, yeah. So let's illustrate this point. Think about Star Trek, episodes. In particular, Star Trek TNG with Captain Picard, Data, that crew. It's like, think of the things that they were able to cover in a 40-minute episode. You know, they were able to go incredibly deep and cover some really major topics in a very short amount of time. And that's just like one example of, you need strong writing, not extra time. Let's see. Yeah. So part of the issue of depth, and by depth I mean not covering superficial topics. You're talking about deep things that are usually glossed over in everyday life. To do that properly, a writer needs to stay true to the question that was asked. So in the case of The Heretic, they came up with, they suggested that what they were going to do is really test the girl's strength, but that's not what they did, right? At least not their, spiritual strength. They had to surely test their physical strength to try and attempt to fight their way out of that basement. But at no point, the writer clearly lost focus of the original question that was asked, at least in the trailer for sure. So, yeah, staying true to the question that was asked is the number one step in achieving depth. Good writing is precision. Another element of being able to write a really strong scene that kind of hits deep is to the least amount of words you can use to say your point, to make your point, the better. A lot of times the misconception is the longer you can talk, the more verbose you are, the more complicated and therefore deep your point is. And that's just not the case. In fact, two things happen when a writer, or really anyone trying to make a point, two things happen when you just go on for too long. The first thing is people get bored, right? It is, you are unfortunately wrong thinking that you have, or you will ever have, an audience that automatically hangs off of every word. You really have to earn every moment of your audience's attention span. The second thing that people really should keep in mind is the longer you take to make your point, the longer you talk, like if you're in a debate, the longer you ramble on if you're, in a fight with somebody and you're trying to prove your point, and the longer you take to make your point in a book or a movie, you are simply creating, what's the word? You are creating opportunities to poke holes in your argument. The more information you give about your argument, the more you drone on about it, that's the more opportunities for people to find loopholes and, wait, well, if that's the way you're thinking, then what about this? The strongest arguments are very quick. Like if you YouTube any kind of debate, you'll see that a lot of times when a strong debater is up against a weak debater, you will get, what happens is the stronger debater says a very blunt sentence. And because it is so short and so to the point, it leaves no room for argument. That's what I mean. It's like the more you try and explain yourself, the more opportunity there is to sort of poke a hole. And it's the same with story um, writing. So it's like if you can say it in very quickly, the better. Um, there is this movie called A Journey in Space and Time, I believe, and it's about the origins of the Doctor Who series, and it takes place obviously like in the 60s with Verity Lambert and the first person who played Doctor Who, and William Hartnell was having memory problems, and he couldn't memorize all of his lines, so he was trying to make a case for himself about why he shouldn't have to learn all of his lines. And he quoted like a director he worked with once upon a time, and he said, "Oh, Bill can say all of this with a look." And it's the same with movies. It's like uh, a lot of information can be conveyed with just what you're seeing on the screen. People's facial expressions, their body language, all of this adds to telling the story. And so, yeah. What else? Um, think about the movie or the episode of Star Trek. I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but it was the episode where Picard is sort of taken prisoner, and this guy is trying to show him five lights, but gaslight him into believing that there are only four lights, or maybe it's the other way around. There's four lights, and he wants to see five lights. The point is, it was a very emotional episode, very great acting. This is another example of somebody covering a lot of really great uh, um, topics, feelings, deep issues in less than 90 minutes, certainly. But anyway, they're at the very last scene of this episode, and it's so short that it's actually kind of cut off. You see after Picard has been sort of rescued and brought back to the Enterprise, there is a scene where he is in Troy's office, and Troy is the ship's counselor, and she's kind of debriefing and seeing how he is doing after this horrible experience, and the last line that is said was, towards the end, I believed that I saw five lights, and then it was like cut to the credits. But the way he said it, and the fact that he said it at all, it's like they didn't have to explain and go into depth about like, oh, he was starting to crack. Even though he was putting up a very strong front, he was actually, very, very weakened by the whole experience. It's like the audience doesn't need everything spelled out, in excruciating detail. The audience actually can sort of pick up on subtle clues like that. So that's like an example of you do not need time to cover deep issues when you have strong writing. So, what else was I going to say? I got my notes in front of me because I am forgetful. So, yeah. Yeah, so there's plenty of examples of this on YouTube alone. You can just look up short films, and so maybe they are not always deep philosophical points. Maybe it's just like deep fears that they tap into. but still, uh, you know, they're still connecting with like an emotion with the audience. Uh, there's several short films on YouTube alone where it's like in just what, less than 15 minutes they can get like the audience's like blood pressure through the roof, and it's really encouraging to see, because this is just an example of what can be achieved when you have really strong writers. And to have a really strong writer, you need, I believe, educated writers. You need people, the more you know, the more you understand, the better you can sort of convey, um, you know, unusual, unorthodox ideas to the audience. And that's where the magic is. So that is my opinion on writing, and how it does not require time, it just requires talent. So let me know what, if you have any, favorite lines or favorite movies that they went extra deep with, because I'd like to hear about it. And that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching.